in Lebanon. And so this very much falls into it. And this is very much a natural topic for us to talk about, given the situation that has happened in recent weeks, but also because the humanitarian situation in Palestine is, by far the most persistent in our region for over 7 decades. And so it is right for us to talk about it and try to do something about it, and at least in a small way. Now, I think the elephant on the table is that this is a very polarizing topic when you talk about the general geopolitical situation and people's conviction on this matter. And you can't disconnect what the topic is, nor some of the stories you will hear from our speakers today from the politics and the history. It's just a part of it. It's interwoven into it. We will even show a video immediately after this, just to put this in historical context, because otherwise we talk about an amputated story. You will not be able to relate to it. However, we are not here to talk about the geopolitical situation. We're not talking about, any of this. What we are talking about is the humanitarian situation and the resulting humanitarian conditions that millions of Palestinians face on a day-to-day basis as a result of this. So what I invite you to do in today's session, as you are listening to our guest speakers and their stories, is to really, regardless of your convictions, of your beliefs in terms of who's right, who's wrong, who's responsible, I invite you to put that aside for a moment and think about what the person and who he is representing or she is representing really are facing as a human being on a day-to-day basis. And put yourself in a situation to say, if I was living like this, if my father was living like this, my mother, my son, my daughter, how would I feel? And as a result, do the speakers and who they represent in general, the Palestinian humanitarian situation, deserve our support, and as the title of this topic, our solidarity. And so with that, I would like to go to Elisar, if you can line up the video, please. So this video is there to provide a bit of a historical context to really 77 decades and multiple generations in terms of how this, where we are, how did we get to where we are today, or how did the Palestinian people get to where they are today? And be able to put it in such a way so that when you hear the stories, because there are millions of stories, but these are stories that are talking about more their personal experiences, is that how does that relate to the generations that has come before them and the situations that has accumulated over the time to where we are today. There's no audio, Elisar.
Are you able to hear it, Dr. Riyadh?
No.
There's no audio, Elisar.
Uh-huh. I don't know what's happening. 1 second. Weird.
To turn on the sound.
It is on. Share sound. Okay, I'm sharing both. Yalla, 1 second. Sorry for this.
Palestine and Israel. It's complicated. Well, at least that's what some people would like you to think. We've long been sold the narrative of a tit-for-tat skirmish of rockets, a real estate dispute, or even a centuries-old religious feud. There's so much more to the story of Palestine we all need to know. So, how did we get here? Let's take it back to the beginning. It starts with the end of a world war, Muslims fighting each other, and a promise made by the West only a century ago. So here's how the story begins. It's 1916, and the First World War is raging on. The Ottoman Empire is 617 years old at this point and is on the brink of collapse. The British and the French had promised the Arabs sovereignty and Arab leadership over the Arabian Peninsula and the Levant if they helped them defeat the Ottomans. And so the Arabs said, okay. And so they helped them defeat the Ottomans. Now I know what you're thinking. What's this got to do with Palestine and the creation of Israel? Just trust me, we'll get there. Okay, so when the British and the French won, the Arabs wanted the land that was promised to them. But little did they know, the British and the French had this little top secret meeting. And in this top secret meeting, it was planned that the captured Ottoman province will be divided into areas of British and French control and influence. The British would receive Palestine, Jordan, and southern Iraq, while the French would control southeastern Turkey, northern Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon. This was called the Sykes-Picot Agreement. But then the Arabs found out about this agreement, and they were shocked. They had been bamboozled and tricked. They thought that they were fighting a war in order to overthrow their non-Arab Muslim rulers, only to end up with, you guessed it, European colonial rulers instead. Anyway, that's a long story for another video. Now that the British occupy Palestine, something unusual is happening back in Europe. You see, the Zionist movement had been growing increasingly influential and lobbied hard to support the mass migration of Jews to Palestine and recognize a Jewish claim to the Palestinian land. And in 1917, Britain out of nowhere publicly declared its intentions of establishing a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine. So the British just gifted Palestine, a country which was made up of 90% Palestinians, to European Zionists. They gave it just like you would give a box of chocolates. Historians still debate till this day why the British gave Palestine to Zionists. It's simply baffling. Now, at this point, the Jewish population in Palestine was less than 10%. So when the British started to facilitate the immigration of European Jews to Palestine from 1922 and 1935, the Jewish population rose to 27%. With the British mandate in full swing, mass European Jewish immigration meant that more land would be seized and the native Palestinian population grew increasingly worried. The Palestinians would demonstrate their concerns to their British overlords, but they wouldn't have it. European Jewish settlement was on the rise. The British proposed a partition of Palestine and even advised the forceful removal of the Arab population from their homes. And yes, this was their plan to resolve the issue. So the Palestinians naturally rejected this proposal and revolted against the British. The revolts were crushed violently, killing thousands of Palestinians. But the Palestinians wouldn't give up. They would continue their fight for independence, and the British were clearly fed up. So in 1947, the British decided to hand over their responsibility for Palestine to the United Nations. So basically, they just said, here, clean our mess. And so the UN proposed this ridiculous proposal again, where Palestine will be partitioned into a Jewish and Arab state. Remember, Jews in Palestine only constituted 1/3 of the population, most of whom arrived from Europe just a few years earlier. Yet, in this proposal, they were allocated 55% of the land. Feeling like they got a bad deal again, the Arabs rejected the proposal, and the Zionists accepted. However, here's the catch. The Zionists didn't agree to the proposed borders, and even campaigned for more land. So they agreed to an Israeli state, but didn't agree to the size of it, so they can just choose it for themselves. By 1948, Zionist militia would storm and capture Palestinian populated villages and cities, leaving thousands of Palestinians homeless and landless. The Zionists wanted to seize and cleanse as much land from Palestine before the British would officially withdraw their forces. And on the same day that they left, the Zionists proclaimed the establishment of the new Israeli state. Overnight, millions of Palestinians lost their country. And what's even more bizarre is that immediately the two superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union, recognized the new state of Israel. And if it couldn't get any worse, May 15th, 1948 was perhaps one of the darkest days in Palestine's history. They called it the Nakba, or the catastrophe. To lose your country, your identity, and your home just like that is something truly horrifying. But that wasn't enough for those Palestinian men, women, and children. They had to be ethnically cleansed from their lands and driven into near total destruction. See, the creation of the State of Israel didn't just mean that 1.9 million Palestinians were forced out of their homes. Didn't just mean that 78% of historic Palestine had been taken from its natives. Didn't just mean that 530 villages and cities were destroyed and ethnically cleansed. And didn't just mean the killing of 15,000 Palestinians in a series of mass atrocities. It means that it was the start of something even more horrifying for the Palestinian people. It signaled over 70 years of occupation, home demolitions, arbitrary arrests, displacements, Israeli expansion, military checkpoints, construction of walls, discrimination, massacres, and bombing of innocent men, women, and children in their own homes. So no, it's not complicated. The Palestinians are a people who have been oppressed and had their lands taken away from them and have been suffering ever since. This is how the events of the past shape the conditions of today. This is why it is important to remember and reflect our history before it repeats itself again. Because Allah knows we don't need it to happen again in another part of the world. May Allah lift the pain and the struggles from our Palestinian brothers and sisters. Ameen.
Right. So I had the distinct pleasure of visiting Palestine about 6 years ago, thanks to our brothers in the Mela chapter in Palestine. And while that trip was a trip of a lifetime, and although I think we were treated as really VIPs, I think, still having someone board your bus with Kalashnikovs and fully in armed gear was really scary. But that was nothing compared to what a typical day is for a resident of Palestine and the occupied territories. So today we will be hearing from some of these, so our speakers today, the first one is Mariam Afifi, who is from a youth generation that is actually facing the occupation in a very new style, very similar to, I think, a lot of people, the youngsters across the entire world. So they are using social media to get their thoughts and their stories heard. And they've been able to impact even normal media. So we've heard about Muhammad al-Kurd and Amun al-Kurd and how their narrative was so compelling that even CNN interviewed Muhammad a couple of times. Now, Mariam herself, I think, became a bit famous because she was, she on a video that became viral, where she was facing the Israeli Defense Forces during the Khan Jarrah incidents that happened a few weeks ago. In this case, she was protecting a little girl, that as a result, she was arrested. And that conversation that she had with the soldier, if you have not seen it, I really recommend that you hear it because it is powerful. Now, as the picture shows, Mariam is a musician. She's a part of the Palestinian Youth Orchestra, which pulls together musicians from Jerusalem, the West Bank, Gaza, and even from the diaspora to have them perform actually across the world. They've even come to my home city in Muscat and performed there. And she will be talking to us about Khan Jarrah, because that was she's from, and from Jerusalem, Al-Quds. That what is a typical day, quote unquote, before all of this, and what has happened, what difference did the recent events make to her life? So Mariam, without further ado, thank you very much for joining us. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Hello all. As it was introduced, my name is Mariam Afifi. I am from occupied Jerusalem.
Last month, a video of me being brutally dragged, attacked, and arrested went viral, and another video of me interrogating, let's say, a soldier while being handcuffed from behind, from that same moment went viral as well. Many don't know how it happened and what the events were, and here I tell you my story. For more than 2 months today, we had been protesting in the Palestinian neighborhood of Sheikh Jarrah in Jerusalem to stand with the around 550 Palestinians who are facing forcible displacement from their homes. And I should mention here that those 550 Palestinians who live in the Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood today that are facing forcible displacement are already refugees and were already displaced from their cities of Haifa, Lid, western part of Jerusalem, and that was in 1948. Together with my friend, we were one of the first people to attend and join the protests in the Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood. But how did we know about it in the first place? Basically, we were experimenting with the newly famous social media platform, if you all know it, the Clubhouse, when we ended in a room where Muna and Muhammad al-Kurd, whom their father and family are refugees from Haifa, were talking about the orders they received to empty their houses so Israeli settlers would steal them and take their places. For so long in Jerusalem, we always hear about forcible displacement, ethnic cleansing taking place in Palestinian neighborhoods here and there in Jerusalem and in the West Bank, especially in Area C in the West Bank. But these news were always as if they're coming from faraway places, even though they only might be like 2 kilometers away from us. Like I live in the center of the city, the center of Jerusalem. So Sheikh Jarrah is literally like 5 minutes away walking from my place, and Silwan is less than 2 kilometers away. Silwan is another neighborhood that is facing displacement in Jerusalem. For so long, the news of displacing Palestinians from their homes to us and to the rest of the world used to be considered as high news, not only in the international media, but also in our local media, showing, if this shows anything, it only shows that how successful the occupation is in imposing and forcing its authority and story in all headlines, like even in our own headlines, like our own local news agencies. For the first time, what's different this time is that for the first time, we saw humans behind these headlines and we heard them talking about their stories. And I'm talking about Muna al-Kurd and Muhammad al-Kurd, as I told you. The first time I heard about it was through Clubhouse, even though they're 5 minutes away from me. They were not from far away places, they were so close to us. Their voices were coming out from our own devices, closer than ever, telling stories that we always hear but never have understood or realized. As I said, Al-Kurd's family is just 5 minutes walk away from my own house, but it took me to suddenly enter a Clubhouse room in order to know about their situation. Seeing Muna and Muhammad talking about their fate and humanizing the case of Sheikh Jarrah has opened my eyes and has woken me, not only me, but also the rest of the Palestinians, especially in Jerusalem. It has woken us up from our slumber to the idea that the fate of those living in Sheikh Jarrah will one day be the fate of each and every Palestinian living in Jerusalem or in other parts of the West Bank, as it has long been. As hundreds of thousands of Palestinians were displaced from Jerusalem after its occupation. You know, they won't take Sheikh Jarrah and say, okay, we displaced the Palestinians from Sheikh Jarrah, we will stop here. No, it's like a domino. It has started 1948 and still ongoing, an ongoing Nakba, we call it. And yes, that's the truth. Israel wants to empty Jerusalem from its indigenous people, us, the Palestinians. And for so long, it has been using different tactics of displacement. When it started 73 years ago, it started with killing and depopulating the Palestinian cities, neighborhoods, villages. But today, as its image in front of the world as the only democratic country in the Middle East doesn't allow it to commit mass killings in a bigger scale, even though it still does this in the largest open-air prison in the world, which is Gaza, every couple of years, it uses its biased courts as a powerful weapon in order to legitimize its policies of ethnic cleansing and forcible displacement.
Mariam,
Today, yeah.
Sorry, can I ask you if you can walk us through the events of that day when you were arrested?
I will, yeah.
Yeah, and if you can maybe walk us through, you know, how did it start? What were you doing in Sheikh Jarrah, and how were you arrested? And maybe even that conversation that you had with the IDF soldier.
Okay, I can come back to it if you want, or do you want me to answer it now? I will talk about it.
Yes, if you could, please.
Yeah, I will come back to it, okay?
Okay, maybe one more minute and then we go to that.
Sorry, so do you want me to talk about it now?
If you could, please.
Okay, I will talk about it now. Basically, I was demonstrating and protesting in the neighborhood of Sheikh Jarrah. For more than a month now, the Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood has been closed only for Palestinians. So Israeli settlers are allowed to enter the neighborhood. The only Palestinians allowed to enter are the Palestinians living inside the neighborhood of Sheikh Jarrah, but they go through very violent procedure in order to enter. But we Palestinians who do not live in the neighborhood of Sheikh Jarrah are not allowed to enter the neighborhood of Sheikh Jarrah. So we have been protesting. I have been protesting for more than 2 months. And last month, I was arrested in the 8th of May. We were protesting outside the Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood because we're not allowed to enter. When I saw a girl being attacked, she was thrown on ground. The ground was full of skunk water. And the 6 or 7 soldiers were attacking her. I tried to help her. Not only me, many people tried to help her as well. But one soldier pushed me away and told me to move away. He shouted at me in Hebrew to move away. I didn't listen. I tried to reach her from another part. And this is when he dragged me from the tips of my hair and from my hijab and started dragging me on street that is full with skunk water, as I said. And then he arrested me. He took a selfie with me without my consent. He put his hand on my shoulder and took a selfie with me with his own phone, personal phone. And yeah, I was arrested. I was arrested. They decided that my court should be after 5 days, but do not minimize the power of social media because of the coverage, the powerful coverage of my story on social media. My court was like, my lawyers could push to put my court 24 hours after my arrest.
And Mariam, did he tell you what was he arresting you for?
In the court, they accused me of 8 accusations.
But when you were arrested by the Israeli soldier,
they wouldn't they wouldn't talk to us, you know. But
right.
in the
but
he said yani, the things he accused me of in the court was 8 accusations: throwing rocks, attacking soldiers, hitting soldiers, interrupting their work, throwing liquids on soldiers, throwing glass on soldiers, like any kind of like they would say any accusations, but they couldn't afford like in front of the violent video that was taken of me being dragged and being attacked and being arrested by the soldier, they couldn't afford anything else, you know.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much, Mariam. I really appreciate you sharing with us, which I am sure was a difficult situation to be in, but it's also, I mean, a situation that unfortunately you're not unique to it, but also that it is happening, you know, across different parts of Palestine to different people. So this actually takes us to our next guest. Our next guest is Doaa. Doaa is actually she's actually a pharmacist and an entrepreneur. So she can talk to us maybe a little bit about being an entrepreneur in a place like Gaza. So she is from Gaza. She's also a mother of a 4-year-old son, and she volunteers for the Palestinian Red Crescent. And I think, you know, Doaa, what I would really like to, you know, understand from you is, what is a typical day in Gaza, which is known as the world's largest open prison with the highest population density in the world? I think it has something like 2.5 million people, in the size of something half of Bahrain, which I think some people at least know the size of Bahrain. But could you talk to us a little bit about what is a typical life in Gaza like, and also under the latest, you know, military conditions that you were facing under the bombardments? What did things become to?
Thanks, Dr. Riyadh. About a normal life in Gaza, I just, before 5 minutes, I lost the electricity. It has gone, and I need.
Sorry, Doaa, we
to
lost
use
you.
an alternative battery for internet connection.
Sorry, Doaa,
I
we
was
lost
saying
you for a
that.
second. If you can repeat it, yes, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. I just saying that. Thanks, Dr. Riyadh. About a normal day in Gaza. Before 5 minutes, I just lost the internet connection as the electricity has gone, and I had to use an alternative, a portable battery, so I could rejoin you and enjoy the session. So I'm going to talk about a normal life. First, I would like to thank Dr. Riyadh for the introduction and Mela for this opportunity. As Dr. Riyadh mentioned, I am Doaa from the Gaza Strip, which is marked to be the biggest open-air prison. Since 2008, Gaza is living in a tremendous situation. Simple things become luxury. The basics in any community are a big deal in Gaza, where the occupation is controlling every aspect of our life. For example, today, I've made a lot of arrangements to attend this session with all 60 hours a day of electricity, and unfortunately, we don't have any access to 3G. The normal life in Gaza doesn't look like any other in the world. In 2010, the Israeli occupation decided to prohibit many different items to come to Gaza without any logical reason. Items like chocolate, plaster, sweets, even knocks and newspapers, and many others. On the other side, or on the other hand, and on the other side of suffering, the possibility of driving out of Gaza remains limited and fraught with security risks and restrictions, while the movement between Gaza Strip and the West Bank is restricted by the Israelis. Only exceptional cases are allowed after getting an Israeli permit, although most of the cases are denied for unspecified reasons. And about this, I have my story. It's about my brother Ahmed. Was one of those people who suffered from this, as he has been diagnosed with a cancerous tumor in his face needed an immediate surgery to save the facial nerve and stop the cancer from invading other parts. For 2 years, Ahmed tried his best to travel outside Gaza for treatment, as hospitals in Gaza doesn't have any capabilities to treat him. But as a result of this blockade, Ahmed will live the rest of his life unable to smile due to the facial paralysis caused by a very late treatment of the tumor. Ahmed's story was not the only one. There are thousands and hundreds in Gaza that you can hear every day. It's normal that you can hear that a 6-year child is sent to be treated in Jerusalem without his parents or her parents. Factors of suffering at Gaza City. Lately, at the beginning of May 2021, a massive, aggressive Israeli invasion took place, which was not the first and unfortunately will not be the least, but in fact, it was the most dramatic. Bombings have never stopped for 11 days. The fear that I felt, the thoughts that I lived in the bomb. Where is it? Who gets hurt? How are my family, my friends? Is it near them or far? The fear I saw in my little son Jawad's eyes with every bomb. The questions he keeps asking me about me. What's going to end? The pressure I'm still living in actually and couldn't overcome. Well, it's not the end. This invasion caused massive devastation for the infrastructure and main roads that lead to the biggest and main hospital of Gaza Strip. It also devastated my neighbors' homes over their heads. Abu al-Auf, Shkunta, and Al-Kolak families resulted in 52 murders of innocent civilians. This invasion ended with 232 murders. 65 of them were kids, 39 women, and 17 elders. As a mother, I've never stopped thinking about what might happen if I had to live such sufferings again with my baby boy Jawad, who will turn 4 in September. Will I be able to give him the life I promised, keep him safe, happy, and peaceful? Actually, I don't have any answers. Well, this is a small overlook about how we are living our lives in the Gaza Strip. And I hope I could help the Gazan people to listen to them and send their voices to them. Thank you.
Doaa, thank you so much. This must have been very hard, I could tell. You know, I have no words, honestly. I mean, it's strange that when I did visit Palestine and I was told that the West Bank has 3G, I was wondering, you know, how could you even live that way? And this was 6 years ago, and now you're telling me you have 2G. And to me, it's not just a matter of that, but that's a symptom of the kind of, situation, because even hearing your voice out is limited. Even sharing your stories is limited. And that to me is also about, sharing that human situation that you live. Now to be then blockaded in such a way and not be able to come in and out. My heart is with you, and I'm sure the case is the same for everybody else that is listening to this. But we are now at a situation where we could, the people on this call, do at least something, a little thing to help, and particularly to help the children in Gaza. So with that, I would like to introduce Steve Sosebee, who is the president of the Palestinian Children Relief Fund. I've seen Steve speak at one of the Middle East Leadership Academies as one of the inspirational speakers, and he was truly inspirational. And he was inspirational because a lot of us, hear about a cause and then kind of like feel like I need to support this cause and do a little bit. But in the case of Steve, he turned around and revolved his entire life around it. And he became one of the very few, if not the only American that I know that has went out of his way to become a Palestinian citizen. And so Steve is going to talk to us more about the PCRF, the Palestinian Children Relief Fund, which is the cause that we are asking you to support and donate to today, what they do, who they are, and what they do in Palestine. He will also talk to us about his view of the situation in Gaza, and maybe also as an American and an outsider to some degree, but he is very much now an insider. With that, I will leave the floor to Steve. Steve, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Moussa, or Dr. Riyadh Moussa, and thank you all for giving me an opportunity to present the work that we're doing in Palestine to all of you. And first of all, give my special respect and appreciation to Doaa and Mariam for their struggle and their courage in continuing the Palestinian struggle for freedom and for justice and for equality. I would like to say also how honored I am to be able to do something for the Palestinian people and for the Palestinian struggle in a positive way. It was 30 years ago when I first went to Palestine, more than 30 years ago, actually, in the first Intifada in 1988. I first, as a college student, was part of a human rights delegation to go and visit and see firsthand what was happening on the ground in Palestine. I had never been to the Middle East before. I'd never been out of the country, my country, the United States, before. So I was very fortunate to go with a group of around 10 other American activists, political activists, human rights activists, to go and see with our own eyes what was happening in the West Bank and Gaza Strip. And it changed my life. It affected me very deeply for two reasons. I saw the courage and the humanity and the compassion and the overall just beauty of the Palestinian people, the Palestinian culture, the Arab culture, and the struggle for freedom, their courage to stand up and to resist the occupation, which was just becoming every day more and more a part of the reality of their lives. And the second thing that changed my life was seeing firsthand the brutality of the occupation, the inhumanity of it, the injustice of it, and knowing as an American that this was my tax money sponsoring and supporting this injustice, completely against the basic core values that our country was reportedly founded on: the individual freedom and liberty, rule of law, equality, and so on. You know, those were values that our country was founded on with the Constitution, but our government was and continues to support the opposite of that in Palestine. So I went back to finish my university degree, came back to Palestine to work as a journalist because I wanted to educate Americans and share the stories that I was seeing every day on the ground, the lives of Palestinians that Americans need to know, the humanity of them. And started to work as a journalist and sharing those stories. And in the course of my work, I met some injured children. This was in 1989, 1990. I met some injured children in the West Bank, a boy who had had his legs blown off and 10 years old. And I arranged for him, I did a story about him, but I also felt responsible, having met him and seen his suffering firsthand, that I should do something to help him get new legs and get walking again. He couldn't get the adequate treatment there in Palestine. So I arranged for him free treatment in the US with his sister. And in May of 1990, brought them over to where I live where I'm from in Ohio, and got them free medical care they couldn't get in Palestine. And these were the first two injured Palestinian children to travel outside for medical care. And it did a couple of things. It got these kids the treatment they couldn't get otherwise, which is the most important thing. It also was in the media. It was on the front page of the newspapers, was on the television news, and was quite a big story. So it was achieving the goal that I'd set for myself as a journalist, which is to educate Americans to see firsthand what was happening on the ground and the humanity of the Palestinians. Here were two beautiful Palestinian children who had been terribly injured by an Israeli bomb, and Americans were seeing that for the first time. So that was a very positive thing. It also organized the communities in the United States to be more involved in the Palestinian struggle, to be more active, and not to allow the frustration and the cynicism that we all feel towards the politicians and those who know exactly what's happening on the ground in Palestine but do nothing to change it. They know exactly the home demolitions, the torture, the violation of human rights, the violation of international law, which takes place every single day. The whole foundation of the occupation is built on this, but do nothing to stop it or to correct that. And it gave, it's very easy to become frustrated or cynical about that. However, we need to channel our energy and channel our emotions into a positive way, and helping kids get medical care, providing medical treatment for children is really a way that we can do something with our energy and that has a positive impact. So I started an organization to bring kids to the United States for free medical care they could not get in Palestine. And in the course of that, building an organization, I met my first wife, Huda Al-Masri, and she was a social worker. So together we built the organization. She would take care of the kids that we sent outside, the culture, the host families, their needs. So as a social worker, and I would take care of running the organization, finding treatment for the kids, fundraising for them to travel, and so on and so forth. And as a team, we built the organization. And for 17 years, the organization was growing. We started sending volunteer medical teams over to operate on the ground in Palestine. We started doing humanitarian projects. The first intifada ended, the second intifada began. We began to take on bigger projects and do more work in dealing with injured kids and helping to build up the Palestinian health sector to be more independent and more sustainable. We expanded into the refugee camps of Lebanon and Syria and Jordan, where Palestinians live and have lived since 1948 as refugees, the world's longest refugee population. And unfortunately, in 2009, my wife Huda, God rest her soul, alayhi rahamha, passed away from cancer, and I was a father with two small girls, Palestinian American girls with IDs, Hawiyas, ID cards in Palestine. And I moved my children back to Palestine after my wife was treated for 7 months in the United States, and raised my girls in Palestine near her family, so I could focus all of my grief and my sadness towards the work to do good for others in her name and in her honor and in her legacy. And we built a cancer hospital. What we did is we started to identify new ways that we could have a bigger impact as a grassroots organization, as an organization that is independent of any politics or independent of any religious or other influences. Our main focus is strictly humanitarian. So we started to take on bigger projects. And in 2003, we opened the first cancer department for children in Palestine, in the public sector, in the West Bank, in Bethlehem. And that department, named after my first wife, the Huda Al-Masri Pediatric Cancer Department, has now for 8 years been operating for hundreds of kids with cancer and providing them free, high quality treatment that they otherwise couldn't get. Before we opened that department, those kids had to travel outside of Palestine with or without their families for very expensive care in foreign hospitals, and often fragmented care, meaning the soldiers would give them a permit one day, and the next time they needed follow-up care, they could not get a permit. So we decided that it's more efficient and it's more effective, and it fits within our overall humanitarian goal, and my goal also to support and serve the Palestinian cause in an effective way, to build a cancer hospital within the West Bank. However, kids in Gaza, as you've mentioned, Dr. Riyadh, and I think Doaa mentioned this as well, Gaza has been described by the United Nations as the world's largest open-air prison, and that's actually true. I've been going to Gaza since 1988. I know every street and every refugee camp in Gaza. However, the people there don't know the world outside, because the vast majority of people in Gaza are not permitted to leave the Gaza Strip. So and that includes people, as Doaa mentioned, of her brother, people who need medical care they can't get locally. Well, that's injustice, but we as an organization wanted to bring those medical services to the children of Gaza. So we opened 2 years ago the first and only cancer hospital for children in Gaza. It's an amazing department. It is open and functioning, and hundreds of kids have gotten free expert care in that department. It's beautiful. It's modern. It has all of the medicine, because our organization continues to provide that. And the treatment is for free for children. In addition to that, we've provided thousands of kids surgery in the Gaza Strip by sending in volunteer medical teams, and we run a variety of other different humanitarian projects. The main point is, and I want to show the video here in a second to give you guys a better idea of what we're doing on the ground there, especially following the bombing of Gaza last month, which has been not an aberration, it's a regular event in Palestine and in Gaza. I want to make sure it's clear that our organization, even though our office was bombed on May 17th, a month ago, that this will not deter our determination to continue to serve the people of Gaza, the people of Palestine, and Arab children throughout the Middle East. So if you'd show the video, I'd really appreciate that. And then I'll just sum up the work that we're doing there, if you may.
There is an urgent humanitarian crisis facing the children of Gaza. For 30 years, the PCRF has been on the ground providing thousands of Gaza children each year surgery, medicine, and other direct humanitarian aid. In 2019, we opened Gaza's first pediatric cancer department. During COVID, we provided hospitals, equipment, and materials, and affected communities direct relief. During the bombings of Gaza, we are on the front line providing humanitarian relief for Gaza's children. In May 2021, our PCRF office was bombed in Gaza, but the next day, our team were in the field providing hospital supplies and materials to treat injured children. Help support our urgent Gaza relief programs by visiting www.pcrf.net.
So that gives you a brief kind of overview of the work we're doing and the importance of remaining vigilant in providing direct services.
Now, call the Security Council open debate to order.
I think you have to stop the video. There you go. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, Steve, please go ahead.
Yeah, so basically the point here is that we all have a responsibility collectively, whether you're, and we see the great work that Mariam and Doaa are doing in Palestine, and I live there most of the time as well. As Dr. Riyadh mentioned, I carry a Palestinian passport now with pride. That was obliged for me to take, and I took it with great honor. But the point is that all of us, whether you're Palestinian or whether you are American, whether you are Jewish or Christian or Muslim or Hindu, whatever your background, whatever your religion, whatever your nationality, whatever your skin color, whatever your gender, we all have a responsibility collectively as human beings to work together for justice and freedom for the Palestinian people. This is not a cause just for Arabs. It's not an Islamic cause. It's not the Palestinian cause only. It's a cause that every person who believes in dignity and freedom should stand with and support the struggle of the Palestinian people in a positive way, in an effective way. We all have our own ideas on what's the best way forward. The most important thing is to find your area that you want to work and work on it. We cannot stay idle. We cannot allow our brothers and sisters on the ground in Gaza, like Doaa and her family, or our brothers and sisters in occupied Jerusalem, like Mariam and her family, to stand idle and to feel that the world has forgotten them. We stand in solidarity with them. We find ways to support them. We give them the strength to keep going and to continue their struggle. And it's an honor and a privilege for me personally to serve the Palestinian cause and serve the Palestinian people. And as our organization, it's an honor for us to serve in a positive way and save the lives of Palestinian children every single day. Thank you guys for giving me an opportunity to talk. I hope you'll support our work. We have a lot of different projects and programs on the ground. Visit our website to check them all out. www.pcrf.net. There's orphan sponsorship, there's medical missions, there's feeding kids abroad, there's an amputee project, there's our cancer department, there's a mental health program we're doing for children on the ground in Gaza, and many, many more programs and projects that we're doing for children, not only in Gaza, but all over the Middle East. Thank you guys again. This is a great opportunity for us to work together, and I hope you all support our work. Thank you.
Steve, thank you so much. You are a true inspiration. It truly is. I mean, we talk about the servant leadership in Mela and the sister networks, and you really embody that. I say that again. So thank you very much for that and for being you. We have a few minutes for some questions. So if you do have a question, let me just share that it's also really great to see we have over 50 participants. I think as far west as the North America, and I think Georgia is probably as furthest west. John King, I'm not sure where you are. I thought you were probably furthest west, but I'm not sure where exactly, and probably in Kazakhstan as well. So with that, if you do have a question, please raise your hand in the system. And I see that Mu'taz is familiar with the system, so he's raised his hand. Mu'taz, please go ahead with your question. And who are you addressing it to?
Thank you so much. I'm addressing it to Steve, but honestly, thank you, Mariam and Doaa and Steve. Inspirational stories, and God be with you. Steve, very quick question. As you are a Palestinian, but also as an American, because we're trying to do a lot of work on social media, like Mariam said. One of the things that always we face is that sort of ignorant and sort of racist question about still the confusion between anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism. And you, when you go back home, I'm sure you face the same thing. People are always scared because they confuse the two, although to me it seems very clear that this is not about Judaism. It's not about anti-Semitism, it's about anti-Zionism. What do you say usually to these people? Thank you.
Sure, Mu'taz. I think this is a very simple argument, a very weak argument from their side, and a very a simple and strong rebuttal on our side, which is that you can't convolute the two issues together. One is religion, one is politics, and it's very basic. Zionism was a political movement to colonize Palestine and remove its indigenous population. This happened, began with the British and the Zionist movement together, as you saw in the video earlier, and continued on through 1948 with the Al-Nakba and 1967 with the occupation. And we see it clearly in the laws and the policies of the Israeli government. It's based on apartheid and it's based on racism. That's a political movement. The Jewish people, we have many, many, many brothers and sisters who are Jewish, who stand with the Palestinians with courage and with determination, millions, because they know that this is a struggle for justice and for freedom. So it's very, and we have doctors who come on our missions who are Jewish. We have doctors who treat our children all over the world for free who are Jewish. We have donors who support our organization who are Jewish. This has nothing to do, the issue of Palestinian rights has nothing to do with Judaism. It has everything to do with freedom and justice for the Palestinian people. So it's a very simple argument. It's when they try to combine the religion with the political movement of colonizing Palestine, it shows they have no other arguments left to justify the uprooting of Palestine's indigenous population. It shows that their weakness and their inability to really justify their actions. All they want to do is use scare tactics. Nobody wants to be called an anti-Semite. When I first came back from Palestine in 1988, on my first trip back, I just came back from the Intifada. I'd first seen with my own eyes. I was very strongly supportive, as I am today, the Palestinian people. And I gave a lecture in my Middle East class, and a student physically attacked me. He took my my photos and smashed them on the ground. He didn't like what I was saying. And I made a decision right then. And I looked at my future. I was just 21 years old. And I said, well, either I see this as an indication that I'm standing on the side of justice, because if you have to use violence and lies and intimidation to stop somebody who's speaking freely about an issue that is based on basic human principles, then you're doing something right. Or I could have told myself, this is too much for me. I don't want to be called an anti-Semite. That's a terrible word. It's a racist. I'm not a racist. On the contrary, I'm working against racism. And I could go and do something else. You know, the blacks in South Africa needed freedom at that time. There was an unjust war in Central America at that time that my government was funding. I could work on those causes, and nobody's going to attack me physically. No one's going to smash my photos. No one's going to call me an anti-Semite. But I said, no, I'm standing with the Palestinians. I just saw firsthand their struggle. I saw their courage. I saw their humanity. I know that it's my responsibility to speak this truth. And if people want to attack physically, or they want to use lies and try to slander me and the work that I'm doing, or the message that I'm spreading, then that's a weakness, and that shows that I'm doing something right. And that only strengthened me. So if they try to call us anti-Semites because we're working for justice and freedom for the Palestinians, let that strengthen us. It shows you that they don't have anything left in their arsenal of arguments to justify the colonization and the uprooting and the subjugation and the oppression of the Palestinian people.
Thank you so much, Steve. I'm conscious of the time, so I just want to inform everybody here that we will continue as long as people would like to continue. But I do want to make the point is that this event today and the Mela network, when we talk about the solidarity with Palestine, the donation that will be coming to you, asking you for support, is in support of the PCRF, the Palestinian Children Relief Fund, that Steve has spoken so eloquently and passionately about. You will receive an email and some more instructions in terms of how to participate and to support this very just cause. Now, to go from there, we have a question from Zainab, who says, unsurprisingly, I have a question. So Zainab, please go ahead with your question.
Hi, Riyadh. Hi, everyone. Really good to be on board. I actually have a question that is related to what you just said now, because I think up to now we have decided of how we want to help and contribute. And I would really like to listen the standpoint of Mariam and Doaa on what they would expect and what they view as most beneficial support. It's not, yeah. No,
so I guess the question is to Doaa or to Mariam in terms of, when people ask, how can we help and how can we support? What is the best way we could do that?
Thank you for the question, Zainab. For me, and especially for my struggle and story I shared with you, I think we need the medical help.
Sorry, Doaa, I think the electricity connection is impacting you again. Can you repeat that, please?
Yeah. Excuse me. Hello, is it clear now?
Yes, please go ahead. We can hear you now.
Okay, I said that thank you, Zainab, for the question. For me, and for the story I shared with you, and for the struggles I lived in, I think that we need medical help for the hospitals in Gaza. Also, we need facilities of traveling or connections with the Israeli borders, or I don't know who is responsible of this, to facilitate the transportation for medical help for the patients, for any reasons anyone could travel or would like to see the other side of the world. For me also, I couldn't see my brothers who were living in Emirates and the UK traveling and studying, as there is no opportunities opportunities here in Gaza. So I couldn't see them for 12 years because of the struggling of travel. But I guess this might help.
So in other words, basically is to be a bit, to support a bit, to liaise with the outside world, right?
Yeah. Also, we need, after the invasion, we need to rebuild the infrastructure in Gaza City, as the main roads to the main hospitals to the work are completely devastated, and the infrastructure damaged, and we had to suffer days of water gone and electricity, unstable electricity.
It would be interesting to hear Mariam, because I think the requirements of the West Bank are different.
Mariam, if you're still with us, is there anything you would like to add to that from your end, thinking about Jerusalem, Al-Quds, and West Bank, the Fat? I am not sure that Mariam is with us.
Okay. She is, but I think she's muted.
Okay, Mariam, you might be muted. Okay, maybe we come back to Mariam. Mariam, are you there? She's no longer muted, but I don't think she's able to connect. Okay, maybe we move on to another question. And you know, as the moderator, I guess I get a little bit of leeway. So I have a question, and I think it's addressed probably mostly to Steve, but also the others if you have any input in it as well. I personally have noticed a sea shift in terms of the reaction from the media, including in the United States, to this particular you know, recent events that have happened. And I would really like to understand your views in terms of what has made the difference this time around. In terms of the type and magnitudes of things that are happening, I don't think this is the first time that something like this has happened. Well, it seems from a media reaction, it is very different. To have even the US Congress to be talking about it in sessions, I don't know if this has happened before. So I'd really like to hear your views and what do you think made the difference this time around? Go ahead, Steve.
Sorry, I was muted. I agree with you. There is a difference, and I think it's a little bit of a complicated response, but I'll try my best to summarize it because of the time issue. First of all, let's not forget in 2014, there was a much worse bombing for 55 days on Gaza, which hundreds of children were killed, thousands were injured. And the devastation and destruction was much worse than it was over the past 2 weeks. Not to minimize what happened over 2 weeks ago, it just shows you how terrible the situation was in 2014 during Ramadan. However, the response on the international scale, as you mentioned, Dr. Riyadh, was much different this time than it was just 7 years ago. And I think there's a lot of different reasons for that. First and foremost, you mentioned Congress. Well, we have now in Congress Palestinians, Americans. We have in Congress Muslim Americans. And they have a voice, and they use their voice, and they speak very strongly on the side of justice and the side of equality for the Palestinian people. So we have that voice in Congress, and that helps. We also have, and I think Mariam mentioned this when she spoke, this power of social media. When I started PCRF and when I first started working as a journalist in Palestine, there was no internet. The only ability you had to really convey your message and to share information was through traditional media, print media, newspapers, magazines, television, and those were all very limited with the outlets that were available. Now we have unlimited ability to reach masses with our own direct media. And I think stories of what's happening in Times or CNN and these other media powers that don't want you to see the reality of the Palestinian struggle and the brutality of the Israeli occupation, that's gone. People use social media now. We can see it clearly. We as an organization use social media, and this has led to a significant change among the masses, among people who see with their own eyes the killing of children, the destruction of Gaza, the eviction or the attempted eviction of Palestinian people in Sheikh Jarrah, the attacks on Al-Aqsa Mosque during Ramadan and the injuring of hundreds of people there. We see it with our own eyes now, the brutality and the injustice. But is that going to make a change on a policy level? Is this going to reflect in the policies of governments towards the Palestinians and towards the Israelis? That we're not at that point yet. We're still far away. And that means we have to continue collectively, like these meetings that you guys have organized here and the work that's being done by Mariam and by Doaa and others, our organization, to continue to share information, to bring the stories of humanity and the stories of courage and the stories of Palestinian, to inspire the world, the dignity of the Palestinian people to the world outside. And the world is paying notice. They're starting to recognize this is a cause that should be a human cause. So I think things are changing. It takes time. We have to keep working. We have to keep using all of the different tools and especially on social media to educate people, to share the stories. The Palestinian struggle is a beautiful struggle. It's one of peace and justice. It's one in which people are sacrificing more than they are aggressive on the Palestinian side. And that's one that everybody wants to support and believe in. So we just have to continue to show the world this is a human issue. It's a courageous issue. It's one that we need to support. And I think more and more people will come over to our side and continue to support us. Inshallah. I should have said.
Thank you very much, Steve, for this. It's clear that the sea is turning. Yeah. But it's not over, and there is still it's still an uphill battle. But when you are fighting for justice, it works out at the end. So I have no doubts of that, and I look forward to coming back to Jerusalem and praying in Al-Aqsa, inshallah, very soon. Okay, I don't see any other raised hands. So with this, I think we can conclude the session. I want to first of all really thank Doaa, Mariam, and Steve for their participation, for their very kind participation, very heartfelt participation. I think for us who have attended, I think there are rarely causes which are so black and white, where a fellow human being's need is so obvious and our participation could make such a difference. So please do participate and do support this event that will happen and the donations that would happen. I will be amiss if I don't thank Elisar and Rima for all the work that they did to organize this event. They are the hidden soldiers behind us, and very much so the entire Palestinian chapter. It was always a pleasure to have known you and have heard your struggles, but now we've heard it even from more people and even deeper. So we really thank you for introducing us to Doaa and to Mariam and to Steve, and for all the legwork that you've done to make this event happen. Thank you very much for all the attendance. We had, I think, at some point, something like 54 attendees, which might be a record for our Mela events. So thank you very much for that. And do not forget to
Dr. Riyadh Muntasir, I think, has a question. He has
Muntasir. Please go ahead, Muntasir.
I have a question.
And that will be the last remark.
No, thank you, Dr. Riyadh. And just on behalf of the Palestinian chapter, I would like to thank you in person, Doaa, Mariam, Steve, Elisar, Rima, and everyone for organizing this. I think this is a good starting point and an excellent starting point to remind the entire world about the Palestinian, story. I think it was great for others to talk about and organize this rather than the Palestinian chapter. So I would like to thank you and everyone for this on behalf of the entire Palestinian chapter. And Dr. Riyadh, I am promising you again to pray in Al-Aqsa once again.
Inshallah, you promised me, when we were in Kuwait, and you fulfilled that promise 2 years later, and I am eternally thankful to you for that, and to the rest of the Palestinian chapter. And I look forward to all of us praying in Al-Aqsa soon.
Especially us from Lebanon, because we're never allowed to go there, which is hopefully a dream come true very soon.
Hopefully, Elisar.
Inshallah.
Inshallah.
Fantastic.
Thank you
very
everyone.
much, everybody.
And I just want to say thank you to Omar Jabari and the Palestinian team. And our hearts are always with you guys. Thank you so much for everything.
Thank you, Elisar, and for all members of Mela.
Yeah, I also would like to thank you all and thank Omar also. Thank you, Elisar and Rima and Dr. Riyadh and Steve also and Mariam. It was a pleasure to join you and talk about our stories. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for sharing that.
Hopefully the recording of this.
Yes, go ahead, Elisar.
Soon. We will be sharing the recording, inshallah.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.